Okay, so take two on the live with an agent. Let's wait for the audience to come in. Let's get Michael invited back in. Oh, hold on. Michael. Michael Bailey. There he is. Invite. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so we're going to try again. Is the sound better now, guys? Just let me know if it is. And then we'll get Michael in. Michael Bailey, bring on camera. Add. Yay! Is the sound better, guys? Yeah? Excellent. Okay, Michael. Okay, Michael, can you hear me?
I can.
Amazing.
Amazing.
Right, let's just check.
Right, let's just check if I can hear the copy.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh.
Oh,
It's gone.
no, it's gone.
How annoying.
How annoying.
I'm on my phone now.
I'm on my phone now. So it's
a Facebook thing.
A Facebook thing, not a device thing.
Those when I added my.
What
device are you on?
Michael? I'm on an iPhone, but I tell you what, let me plug my headphones in because maybe it's feedback or something from that.
Ah, okay, that's good.
Okay, that's good.
2 secs, gang. We're working on it. 2 secs.
2 secs.
Okay.
There you go.
Right, how's my sound now, guys? Michael, you talk.
Morning, everyone.
There we go. Well, I can hear you fine. And hopefully, oh, I'm getting some likes and some hearts, so that must mean it's
fine.
Working. Brilliant.
Okay.
Right, we fixed it. Well done, Michael. Good job. Okay, so the last question I asked, I think, was something around the lines of, we were on the topic of relationship building and how important it is to put the work in. So from your perspective, doing it the way I do it, which is basically just touching base with my agents once a week, what's new on the market, what's happening, what are you up to, did you go out on the weekend, all those sorts of things. Is that the right way to do it, the wrong way to do it? What's your advice on that?
No, I think that's definitely the right way to do it. The advice I gave to that lad I've been speaking to in Yorkshire was exactly that. Get in the offices, talk to the agents, make sure you're familiar with them, tell them sort of exactly what you're looking for. Obviously, it's not always possible because you might not be sourcing to order. You might be generally looking for deals and then passing them on.
Yeah.
But yeah, generally be memorable, be in the office and make sure you're top of mind. So that contact every period of time, week or 6, 7, or 7 days or whatever. Just even to talk about the industry or the business. Perhaps there's a if you've already built some sort of relationship, perhaps there's a headline that comes out about agency and see if that ties into investment as well and see whether there's an angle there to discuss with someone. The most important thing I would say on that is trying to find the right person in the office to build the relationship with.
How do I do that? So if I pick the phone up cold to an agent, how do I find the right person but not piss off the person that's picked up the phone?
It would be to try and work out who sounds the most motivated, the most progressive. You might need to go out and view properties with the agents to work out who that is or isn't.
Yeah.
Because that then will stand you in good stead to be dealing with the right person in the office. Don't get me wrong, there's lots and lots of brilliant agents up and down the country. I know there is. But like any industry, there's also perhaps some people that aren't as motivated as they once were. Some people that are perhaps not as progressive as they once were. And to be honest, don't even know what goes on in the wider investment world or property world, other than just a standard residential transaction.
Okay, cool. So on the topic of relationship building, one of the things that I do, and a lot of the people that I work with do, is remote sourcing. So I will source I'm based in Milton Keynes, but I'll be sourcing to order for an investor in Plymouth who wants houses in Plymouth, right? The challenge that most people have here is I don't go and do viewings. I work in partnership with my investors, and my investors actually do the viewing, but they do the viewing after we've had an offer in principle, like a number accepted in principle. The objection that most people are getting nowadays, it wasn't a problem when I first started, but it's becoming a problem. And I think because a lot of people who do what we do have done it badly for a long time and pissed off a lot of agents, let's be honest, that's definitely what's happened, is that now agents are saying things like, we're not going to let you put an offer in unless you viewed it. We're not going to put your offer forward unless we've seen proof of funds. And there's objections appearing that never were there 3 years ago. What's your thoughts on
that? Okay, so my thoughts in terms of offer, is that it's got to be reported to the vendor in writing, regardless of proof of funds or not. Whether the vendor wants to take it or whether I advise the vendor to take something like that, you know, I would always advise the vendor of the risk with such an offer. But that will be the main objection. But again, it's very difficult to almost overcome that, because if there is someone that's being a blocker, if you want, then there's almost very little you can do about that. And that's why the relationship side of it is so important. Yeah. Because if you build that from the outset, you get the good foundations and building blocks, which means moving forward, these issues shouldn't really be there.
This is it.
Yes, I know some agents.
You need an agent to champion you as the person that they should accept the offer from, regardless of the number. We should have done a good enough job of explaining to the agent why we're the person they should pick and why we should be the ones they champion to the vendor. In terms of, would you say that's all down to relationship?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. And again, it doesn't matter whether it's a resi or an investment, or it doesn't really matter. It's about, because the vendor's going to ask me or any other agent for their recommendation, especially, let's say there's two people interested, John from Manchester who's sourcing for somebody, and then perhaps yourself, and you've built the relationship. Well, if I have to make a judgment call if the vendor asks me to, then obviously I'm going to, the numbers are obviously the main driver, but then if the vendor wants me to delve further into that, then I'd always go on, well, okay, this person has done this, they came to do the viewing, they provide their proof of funds at the point of offer, etc., etc. The demonstration of intent as well is quite important to me. Okay,
what's the best way to demonstrate the fact that we will actually transact?
Is get everything, when you're making your offer, make it a complete offer from the outset. So my offer for this 2-bedroom terrace is 70k. Here's my solicitor's details. Here's my proof of funding. This is my client's AML stuff, their IDs and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So the offer is wholeheartedly prepared. There's no room for anything to slip through the cracks.
Yeah.
It's almost like if you imagine if you transact in Scotland, you have the pack of information from the outset.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same, but
get it to that level.
Yeah, but in reverse. Yeah.
Okay. So for those people that are sourcing just ad hoc, sourcing to find the deal first and haven't got a buyer yet, obviously those people, the reason they're doing it like that from our perspective is they're trying to do their first, second or third deal. They're trying to get started. So we've got this kind of catch-22 when you're really, really early on, is that you might not have a buyer yet to put like full details and things like that. I remember when I first started, I just used to put our solicitor's details in, or I would put 3 different solicitors, which were the solicitors that we recommended to our client, to kind of just show that we've thought about the transaction process. So for the people doing their first ever deal, putting their first ever offer together, I mean, I always teach that you should put an offer pack out with, you know, the calculation of how we've got to the number, the research that we've done, the due diligence that we've done, the actual offer itself, as much information about us to build trust and credibility as you can anyway. Is there any other advice you give to those that maybe don't have a buyer yet, but are trying to kind of get out of this first time, second time deal type situation?
That would be for me to sell it to the agent on what's the benefit to them. So
Okay.
let's say you mentioned Plymouth. Let's say you've got 25 Plymouth Street that's been kicking around on the market for a while. You know that, everyone knows that. It's, you know, it's there clear for everybody to see. The markers are on Rightmove. You have an offer accepted, and you try and sort of sell the agent, if you will, on a period of exclusivity, not massive, maybe a week, 10 days, a couple of weeks, to try and see if you can find someone for it. As long as the agent gives full disclosure to the buyer, to the seller, sorry, then I don't think there's an issue with that. And sell it to the agent in as much as, well, I'm solving the vendor's problem. This has been kicking around for a while. And then obviously that would need to be passed on to the vendor in the same way. I know that worked, not for investment, but certainly we've done a number of resi deals like that recently, because, so coming from London, when I worked in London, the market's so hot, so quick, most people are proceedable, so there's no issues with that.
Yeah.
But in the Northwest, for example, while the market's really good at the moment, it is a little bit slower in terms of where your buyers are coming from or whether they're proceedable or not. So I can remember a deal, 2 houses on the same road, people at number 10 to 12. We had an asking price offer from the people at number 7. We gave them 2 weeks exclusivity to sell theirs, which they managed to, and the whole chain came together. So it's not the same thing, but the idea is exactly the same.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of, let's talk numbers for a minute. Okay. So from our perspective, when we're sourcing on behalf of a client or even sourcing for ourselves, ultimately we're sourcing with investment in mind. Yeah. Typically, you're dealing with the traditional retail market, the retail buyer. That is kind of your primary market. The way that we do numbers is different. And that's because, obviously, if you're buying something to refinance, we have to have the 25% margin in there to be able to refinance it off the back end and get as much money back out as we can. Or if we've got an investor, they're trying to buy it well so that they've got a degree of protection if the market moves around and things like that.
Okay.
So first of all, how does an agent value a property? When they first go out to look at it, to get the instruction from the vendor, what's the process you go through to come up with the number that you put it on the market at?
Okay. There's two answers to the question.
Yeah.
There's one, and as I said, I just want to get this in there again. There's loads of brilliant agents up and down the UK.
Totally. There's loads.
But there's also some that aren't so brilliant, like any industry. You've got two ways of valuing. You have got experience valuations are based on a number of different things. So they're based on the overriding market conditions. Are we transacting a lot at the minute? Are we moving not too many, etc.? What's the buyer numbers like out there? You know, have we got a strong market or a bit of a weaker market? What do the comps say the property's likely to be worth?
Where do you get those comps from?
You can get them from a number of places, but mainly where everybody else would, Rightmove, Zoopla, etc. To start with, the only difference is we as agents have like a back office system that we can use on Rightmove to see previous listed properties, which sometimes gives a bit more of an insight. Okay. If you've got, let's say there's a 3-bedder on Manor Road which sold last year at 150, say, you're going to go and see another. You'll always, or I'll always go out with that as kind of like my base price, but then I'll also look at, well, what are the features and benefits of this particular property over that? Where's the added value? What is the added value? When I'm looking, I make a judgment call on that based on experience. And I also try and see what are the steps above and the steps below, i.e. what's a 2-bedder, what's a 4-bedder. And sometimes we just go through the ceiling price because it's so fantastic, it's so different. But the only way you can make that call really is based on judgment. And having an open and frank dialogue with a vendor to say, look, this is what I think. Let's put it out to the wider market. Let's see what the response is and go from there. Yeah. You can look at pound per square foot values. Now, not many people in Europe, that's how all the valuations are done, pound per square foot. And I think in America and Australia as well. That's an interesting guide that I've been using sort of fairly recently. There's a good bit of software that's been developed for agents, by agents in that regard. And basically having a bit of a holistic look at the entire proposition who's the likely buyer, and putting all of that together and coming out with a number. Now, the second less researched, less able or trained valuer, I guess, looks at what sold next door and roughly puts the same price on it. And again, maybe I'm being too simplistic and unfair. If I am, I'll happily take the criticism. But for me, from what I see on a day-to-day basis, it's either that or it's even worse in as much as, well, that's the value last year, so let's just lob another 20 grand on top, get someone signed into a long agency agreement and see what happens.
Okay. So when someone comes back to an agent with a low offer, so let's say it's on the market for 100 grand and they come back with like a 60 grand offer, how annoying is that to you as an agent? Like, does it offend you because we're basically saying your price that you put on it is wrong? Or if someone can scientifically show you why they've got to 60 grand, do you think, well, actually, yeah, fair enough? Like, what's the general mindset of an agent in that place?
Yeah, the general mindset is to be a bit
offended.
Yes, yeah, offended basically. Yeah, not least of all, I don't think it's from like an egotistical place. I think it's more from you've got to go and try and present that to the vendor, which is a difficult conversation. But at the end of the day, the way that I and many of my colleagues and contacts throughout the country would see it, a low offer is a low offer. It might not get accepted, but our job is to have the conversation regardless.
Yeah. And
or be skilled enough to deal with that offer in the moment, to obviously let the person know that it's not going to be where it needs to be.
Yeah.
And obviously then further to that, report it to the vendor, have a discussion, whatever.
I think a lot of people forget that our job as sourcers, we are negotiators. Our job is to negotiate between the investor and the agent, or the investor and the vendor. Your job is also negotiator. So your job is to negotiate between the vendor and us, or the vendor and the buyer, right? Between us two, between the sourcing person and the agent, we've got two, what should be incredibly good negotiators that should, in theory, be able to work together as partners to find a number that works for everybody, right? Instead, what seems to happen in our world is we do this and we just butt heads. We tell you you're wrong and you tell us we're wrong, and it turns into nothing. So do you think that's down to relationship again? Fixing that problem?
Yeah, really, yeah. But I also think it's down to any valuer, as good as they are, is not going to get everyone right.
Yeah.
From our perspective, that's just how it is. And anyone that thinks they're going to go out and get them all right, we're not talking massive difference. I think you've always got probably a 5% margin, either higher or lower than whatever price you set. But we need to, if we're dealing with an investor or a sourcer, understand that the goals that we've got are completely different, massively different. But I think perhaps if you get a low number, a lot of agents will get too caught up in that. If, for me, yes, it's low, but let's put that to one side. We have an offer.
Yeah.
Is there a position kind of similar to what you've said that we can get to where we feel we're still doing our job for the vendor and getting the best price?
Yeah.
But also you're still happy to purchase. Yeah. I think the other thing to understand is for agents, this is pretty straightforward, and I'm sure everyone gets this, but you're not going to get every offer agreed. The same with a sourcer. You're not going to get every offer agreed, but the way you would look at it, a lot of the chaps, including yourself, that are kind of on the training side, are just telling you to revisit your offers, because you never know when something which 6 months ago was awful, for whatever reason 6 months later is getting more towards acceptable, or perhaps you're only going to be 2.5 or 5 away. Okay, is there a margin there? Can the investor do something to make it work? So yeah, I think agents find it frustrating generally, but for me, I've always been taught there's no such thing as a bad offer, because at least if there's something on the table,
it's a buying signal all day long.
And it might not be a signal to intent to purchase on that, because it might not happen, but it's an intent where you're offering. So perhaps in the future, if something comes up which is more suitable, then we can do business together.
Absolutely. So let's go back to the question about making offers without having viewed. So why do agents, I mean, so from our perspective, I appraise so many deals all day, every day, numbers, right? So I can look at a house in the same way that you can probably know that 123 London Road sold for this, and so that, and 2 houses up the road sold for this. Right move, Zoopla comps, my experience, the current market, demand, etc., etc. I can appraise a house at my desk. I don't need to walk in it, provided the photographs are right and the condition that you tell us about is right. I can tell you what a house is worth by spending 20 minutes on my laptop figuring that out. So yeah. I'm appraising, you know, I put out, our team put out somewhere in the region of about 30 to 50 offers a week, generally speaking, if we can, on a good week, right? But we do that without having viewing them, because we wouldn't be able to do that volume and deliver the business that we do if we had to go and see every one of them. So what's the best way to explain to an agent that we're making a in principle offer, and if the number's about right, we'll get an investor to come and rubber stamp it? How would you recommend that we do that, so that you understand that it's a desktop and an in principle, and that we will rubber stamp that offer once we've got it into the ballpark that the investors actually find it attractive?
I think it's just driving that point home, because I think the hang up about getting deals done where you've not viewed is that agents perhaps aren't listening properly to the offer.
Yeah.
In the respect of, it's an in principle offer. Yeah, it's not a guarantee. We do need to view it, but in principle, if we can get this number agreed, we'll send our investor in your area to come and have a look.
Yeah.
And as long as it's as it reflects what's in the pictures, the details and whatnot, then we'll rubber stamp the deal. Number. Yeah, but it's about getting that clear to the vendor, because obviously vendors, you've got an offer. If it's not handled correctly by the agent, the vendor gets kind of giddy, which is fair enough and right. But always, yeah, it's getting that across to the agent to get that across to their client. Look, this is an in principle offer. If once we've viewed it, then we can get then it's as we expected. Mm-hmm. Then we can do the deal, no question, at that number.
Yeah, and I think from our perspective, when we're sending in principles, we send proof of funds, we send the full calculations, we send all the comps that we've used, we send everything as if it was a full offer. But we just say it's in principle, subject to the site viewing. Provided what you've shown me matches what's there, this will be the offer.
Yeah.
Do you see any problem, any reason why that should present a problem, if you can explain it well enough?
No.
Okay, good.
It's a from your perspective to us, and from our perspective to you, it's just a mindset thing. You got to try and well, what are the benefits? The benefits to the agent, what are they, and explain them. Well, the benefits are we've potentially got a deal for you. So even if we don't go ahead at the number we've given for whatever reason,
yeah.
Well, one, you've still got the chance to do a deal, and two, you've still done good work for the vendor, because although it didn't go anywhere, you have actually delivered them another offer.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it gets you, from my perspective, it would provide a bit of positivity, and perhaps we don't sell it to an investor, but we've got a deal and we've got a number on the table, and it doesn't go through. Well, at least then we're making progress through the stages. It's all from my side anyway. It's all a statistical game. You would do a number of viewings to offer. We do a number of deals to offer ratio, and it's just about going through that statistical analysis to make the vendor know. Well, look, okay, we didn't do the deal with this person because they came, and it was damp and they weren't expecting that. But hey, the good news is we're now another stage closer to getting this sold for you.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. It's really helpful. And it's something that I've believed and known for a while, because it's how we communicate. And like I think you've already really reinforced today, is it's all down to relationships. If you've only ever spoken to that agent once, why would they trust you? Why would they believe you when you say, well, this is in principle, this is how we do it? Well, they're not going to care. What they care about is how you are. In my experience, what an agent really cares about is how we help you serve your client better. If we can't show you the benefits of serving your clients better, which is ultimately so you get paid and so we get paid, then why would you champion us? Why would you? So I think it comes down, I think it's a really good point you make. Think about the benefits to you. Think about what's in it for them as opposed to what's in it for us. Do a good job for them and we'll get paid as a consequence, right?
Yeah, and it's the same from us to a buyer per se. Is it's all about selling benefits?
Yeah.
Because if we can get the buyer to see the benefits, then we get into a negotiation, then we go to work and get the offer to the correct level for the vendor.
Mm-hmm.
I think everything that we do, and the more that I've looked at sort of general training in agency, speaking to my colleagues, the features and benefits side of everything is massively important, because it's all well and good saying, I'll use one of our, the agency examples. We're open Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great, but what's the benefit of that to any seller? And thinking about it in those terms will help us relay your message to any vendor that we've got.
Excellent. So one of the other objections I know a lot of people are getting at the moment is, and I mean, I know the reason why, but I want it to come from your mind rather than mine, is we've got agents saying they won't put offers forward until the buyer has sat down with their in-house broker.
Yeah, that my thoughts are that really is a total joke. Not least of all, it's illegal. There's no compulsion for any buyer to do that. Some agents want you to do that, which is fine, and some people will go through those motions, and again, that's absolutely fine. But basically, that's an absolute load of rubbish.
Thank you very
it's
much.
illegal. We can't coerce people to doing anything. If you want to come and see the broker that the agency works with, go for it. The difficulty is, I would say, when I've challenged that in the past, when I've been buying, when you know your onions kind of thing and you know what the law is, then they quickly back down.
Yeah.
But again, if you are in the area and it's going to get you the transaction, then sometimes it's beneficial to see them. Not because you're going to do the mortgage, but if you go through the motions and you jump through the hoops and you kind of get the property that you want, then it's worthwhile. But because I know a lot of what you do is remote,
yeah,
it's never going to
and
work.
also
And it's unnecessary.
a lot of it's with investors, and investors generally have their own brokers. So they,
Well,
I've got a broker that I trust, that knows me, knows my financial situation, knows the company, knows where our flex points are, knows where all my paperwork is, for example. Sitting down with a new broker, the first time I ever got a broker, it blew my mind up. Like, I'm not the most organized human being in the world, so I had to find all my paperwork and stuff. So investors like to stay with their own broker. And I think, like you said, I just wanted you to confirm it is illegal. They can't not put your offer forward just because you're not using their broker. So yeah, don't let that be an issue. Okay, so let's go on to the more creative strategies. Yeah, so we talked a lot about below market value and purchasing and things like that. Let's talk a little bit about rent to rent. Okay. What are your thoughts as an agent about the concept of rent to rent in general? Do you think it's about well, what are your thoughts on it, first of all?
Okay, so in terms of me as an agent, as I said before, I'm very lucky. I love my job, and I'm always wanting to know what else is going on out there. So I've, to a greater or lesser extent, been involved in property networking since about 2010, something like that, on and off and sporadically. So I've got a good understanding of all these different strategies that people are employing. Not everybody does. I think I was talking to some colleagues of mine in London about a week ago on the letting side, and that surprised me, because he threw in straight away about rent to rent. Sorry, happy to do it, love doing it, guarantees for the landlord, etc. So again, it's just about education of the agents into what it actually means.
Yeah.
Making sure that, as everyone does, I'm sure, get your ducks in a row. We're allowed to do that. If we're going to do SA, we can do that with the mortgage conditions, and if it's a leasehold, in the leasehold. I personally don't have any issue with it if I can find a willing landlord that wants that kind of commitment and that kind of long-term tenancy and understands the nature of the beast. It's been going on for years generally in terms of corporate lets. It's not different to that really at all. It's just about, again, explanation and getting people to understand what it's about. But me personally, I wouldn't have a problem with it.
So in terms of explaining rent to rent to a landlord, you sit in the middle of us and them, right? And we, as rent to rent operators, as sourcers, we know this strategy because we've trained in it, we've practiced it, we do it day to day. We then have this challenge where we present an offer to an agent, or we present a concept even to an agent. And then we are reliant on that agent communicating the value of rent to rent as a strategy to the landlord and handling the objections that really, if we were handling, we'd be able to do that really well because we know how it works. what are the biggest objections when presenting a rent-to-rent proposal to a landlord? What are the biggest objections that the landlord has to you that you have to overcome so that we can get better at teaching you guys how to do it when we're building our relationships?
I just think generally the unknown factor of who's actually going to be in the property potentially.
Yeah.
Let's say you got one that's going to be, you're going to HMO it or whatever.
Yeah.
The unknown nature of that, whether they're going to get paid or not. But again, that all comes with if it's done through a company, for example. Well, again, the referencing, we'll do the due diligence properly as we would on anybody. I think it's just an education thing from the landlord's perspective as well. All the objections can be overcome. But I think what I would do if I was someone trying to get those kind of transactions from agents is I would go in and literally teach them what it's about properly, without doing that whilst trying to do a deal.
Yeah.
I.e., go in tomorrow, set it up, let them know what you're looking for, let them know exactly how it works, leave that to lie for a bit, go back in again and sort of see whether they've had any further thoughts about it, if they've got any further questions. Because I think too many people are trying to get something like that done and do the education part of it in the same transactional area, which it's too much. If you've never heard of it before, these strategies take time to process and understand. And again, for me to explain anything to a seller or a landlord, if I do that from any position of
urgency, they're going to be freaked out.
Yeah, and or not having the confidence to answer any of the objections that they've got.
Yeah.
So again, I would run through some of that objection handling with the agents that you're aware comes up day to day from your experiences with other agents and help trying to educate them. You're not going to get all these different types of strategies to work with every different kind of agent, but you need to try and find out who in your town or your area that you're sourcing is open to rent to rent, is open to assisted sale or whatever. Who is there that is understanding each of the models, and can you work with more than one provider?
You know, obviously everybody that's watching this video now knows that you're open to it, which means your agency is going to get a million phone calls this week.
Good.
Be ready for that. I think the thing that we try and reinforce when people we're teaching is there's a lot of people that made a lot of mistakes around rent to rent, in my opinion, is for a long time, people have rung up and said they want to be the tenant and then swapped it at the end. Very similar to the experience that you've had with buyers. They've pretended like they're going to be the tenant, and then all of a sudden, right at the end, they flip it on to an investor, or right at the end, they decide actually they're going to be HMO in it, and they've never mentioned anything about it all the way through the process. How frustrating to an agent is that, and why is it so frustrating?
Well, I think it's a fear of the unknown. It undermines your credibility as an investor or as a sourcer. Yeah. Anything like that happens last minute, whether it's on a rental or a sale, strikes fear into the agent because it can blow the deal up. And what we want really, for everybody's sake, tenants, sellers, sourcers, sellers or landlords, is to make the transaction as smooth as possible.
Correct.
With as least amount of bumps in the road as we can get, to make sure that it is stress-free. You know, the last thing that I need to be doing to a landlord that we've agreed a rent to rent, is 2 days before we're going to exchange keys. The whole
thing changes.
Heads of terms almost of the deal, it changes. And obviously, if you don't understand it anyway, and the agent has done good work to get a deal agreed, the agent will want to run a mile really, and they can only advise the client based on what's happened, which is, to be honest, that makes people look untrustworthy.
Yeah. And also what I think a lot of people forget is that then makes you look like a dick in front of your client. And when you look like a dick in front of your client, you lose the opportunity to rent that house out or sell that house, which means, one, you lose revenue, you lose faith in us as sources because we've ultimately lied to you, and your client now feels like they've got no faith in you because they feel like you've misled them. And I think a lot of people forget that when you are not completely transparent and open and honest from the outset, it doesn't just impact your own reputation. There's a knock-on domino effect that has, because then that landlord is out in your marketplace saying, bloody hell, that agent, he like lied to me and he tried to put this weird contract in and it all changed. And that's not fair for us to do that to you because we want to try and sneak a deal through under your nose. It's way easier just to be totally transparent. Would you agree?
Definitely. And I think moving forward, if there's, so let's say, so we've got two examples. So we've got someone that tries to change everything last minute.
Yeah.
And we've got someone that's been fully upfront from the outset. Let's say the deal where the person tried to change everything didn't happen. We're two weeks down the line. We've got another landlord with a property that's sort of knocking around on the market, not going anywhere. Then we've got the two people that we could potentially call. The one that's obviously given us all the information up front, or the one really that's tried to, even though this isn't the case necessarily, on our side, feels like you've tried to turn us and the landlord over, basically, to be honest with you. Obviously, we would then ring everybody, but if the person who was more trustworthy and had been totally upfront from the outset wanted the property, and the landlord asked for recommendation, then obviously we can only go off, well, look, we've got Mr. A and Mr. B. Mr. A last week, messed us around, so we're not too sort of confident in him.
Yeah.
And we've got this other person, look, this is what they want to do. They've been totally clear from the outset. You decide if either of these work for you, Mr. Landlord, but this is what we're up to. And my advice to you, if you are seeking it, would be to run with a person who's a lot more straightforward. Again, it's always down to the landlord or vendor to choose, but if they ask me for my advice, I'll always try and give it to them in the most honest way that I can.
Amazing. So in terms of trading rent-to-rent deals, so again, we source on behalf of a client. It's like the first thing that comes out of my mouth. I'm sourcing on behalf of a client. The client's looking for accommodation for working professionals, etc., or for whoever they're looking for, whether it's SA or HMO or whatever it is. Do you think that disconnect of me being the person talking to you, but doing it on behalf of somebody that's effectively unknown to you, do you think that disconnect creates a problem? And if so, what's the best way for us to reassure you and the landlord that it doesn't need to be a problem?
Yes, I think it presents a problem. And I think the way that we need to, it's just general reassurance, talking the agent through what's happening, talking them through how it's going to work in practice moving forward. And again, what I said before, like the features and benefits of it. And just literally explaining down to, really to the minute detail how it works, why you're doing that in that way. And the easiest way to do it, as I said, is before you find somewhere that's open to it, because otherwise you just end up in a pickle where the agent thinks you're doing one thing. Yeah. You get to the other end and it's something a little bit different to that, and that is frightening for the agent. Yeah.
I think when we're doing training and things like that, we kind of reinforce: get your marketing out, make your calls, build your relationships. Talk to them about properties they have, but assume that's not the deal you're going to do. Just have that as kind of the bridge, the opening conversation, the dialogue opener. But assume that you're going to need to make 4, 5, 6 calls to them before they really get what you do, and actually to talk contracts before you're ever looking at a house. Talk about how you're going to make an offer before you ever look at an actual house. Get all that stuff done really in advance, so that when you get to the deal that you really want, you actually have already done all the negotiation points and you've got access to the stock that they have, and they're happy for you to look at everything. Would you agree that that's probably the best way to go?
Definitely. And I'd also say, because obviously if a lot of stuff's done remotely by telephone, so identifying that right person might be difficult, but you're going to need to have in-depth conversation about these strategies that you're going to employ. Yeah. So that would involve, with me, most agents are exceptionally busy, so I would go so far as to ring to introduce yourself, and rather than sort of go into everything straight away, is just say, look, I know obviously agents are busy, so I just want to explain to you what I'm going to do. Have you got some time tomorrow, next week, whatever, where I can spend just half an hour explaining to you what I'm going to be doing? Because I think a lot of agents will take the call potentially, and because they're so busy, because it's a lot of information, perhaps not process it all. Yeah. And again, you kind of get you're on the database, of course you are, but then you get kind of lost in the background noise of everything else that's going on. So yeah, that's kind of how I'd approach those conversations, really.
So I know that one of the biggest challenges that a lot of our guys have, or the guys that I kind of coach with, they say to me, well, I pick up the phone and I start to talk to them. They just want to get me off the phone as quickly as possible. My response to this is usually it's because, one, they're busy, and two, people are frightened of what they don't understand. So an agent typically is on a conveyor belt, instruction to let, instruction to let, instruction to sale, instruction to sale. And generally, most of them are just doing traditional all of the time, all the time. The second we come in with this wrecking ball of, not only is it not for us, but we're also going to do something completely creative. We're going to come in with a low offer. All of these wrecking balls come in and try and knock you off your conveyor belt. Of course, you're going to want to get off the phone as quickly as possible, because we've not done a good enough job yet of explaining what we do. So in that first call, when we make a call to your office for the first time and you're busy, and we open the conversation with, look, we're sourcing on behalf of a client, we want to talk to you about it. What's the best way to get over that kind of, they're hanging up within 15 seconds of us being on the phone? What's the best way to get someone's attention, would you say?
It's a difficult question because it happens way too often. Yeah. I would say definitely just at that point, as you said, I'm sourcing on behalf of I'm sourcing properties on behalf of investors. Give them your broad criteria, and understand that at that second you're not going to get presented potentially with anything to view, although we need to take the time to speak to people to get them out to view, because statistically that means we'll do more deals. But anyway, and I generally think a follow-up call or 2 follow-up calls without bamboozling someone with too much information will get you to where you need to be. Email is a great way as well. Again, email doesn't build a relationship to me, but it's a good way of conveying information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can have a quick chat. You can follow up with an email with your website maybe on it, and then follow up to check that they got the website, and then follow up to check they've read it. I think it's that, they used to say it was like 7 touch points before someone would do business with you. And I think it's probably more now in today's day and age. They're going to check you out on Facebook. They're going to check you out on Google. They're going to probably Google your company, your own personal name, all those things. So, it comes back, doesn't it, to put in the work in, to build a relationship, so that the relationship is the thing that champions it all. It doesn't really matter about the rest, because if they've got a good relationship with you, they can, if they don't understand something, they'll just ask you to explain it better so that they can explain it to their client. And I think our industry forget that you report to a client, you get paid by somebody else, and actually it's them that we need to satisfy, both of us, you and us. One of the clients has just put on here, is it okay to invite an agent out for lunch, or is that deemed inappropriate?
It's not inappropriate. I would say it's frowned upon, but at the end of the day, it's just relationship building. So I personally wouldn't have a problem with that. But again, like in any industry, there are some uptight people, I guess, who would see that as a big deal. But at the end of the day, I would see it, if we're going to try and build a relationship, and my job is to sell or let to you, from our side, for the best price or under the best terms or whatever it might be. The way for me to do that with you is for me to also build a relationship back with you.
For sure.
Because then I know if you're making me an offer at X, Y, or Z, and I've built my relationship well enough with that buyer, I will know relatively to within a couple of grand, say, for a purchase, where that would go to with you. But no, I don't see a problem with that, no.
Fine. Is it true that every agent has their black book of investors that they called about deals first before they got on?